Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me for my review of AMAIM Warrior at the Borderline Episode 9, Autonomous City. We start off with the three pilots in some city getting supplies, where Tezuka runs into his brother. So it looks like we're going to have another episode without progressing the plot. And then another backstory. This time Tezuka gets lost in the mountains when he was a kid, and then one of his friends from Yatagurusu winds up becoming his brother. So it's not his actual brother, it's more like his brother. I don't feel like we really need a reason to believe that Tezuka and a person that he calls brother are close, but at least the flashback was short. Tezuka then meets up with his brother like later on that day, and it winds up that his brother is like the mayor of this like Japanese only autonomous town that he created, and like everybody loves him and the town's great or whatever. And he tries to convince Tezuka to leave Yatagurusu to join the city. Then evil business guy shows up and he tries to create some trouble and accuses the brother guy of being a spy for the Asian military. And that's how he got the Asian military to approve the city. So Tezuka does some undercover work, which he goes undercover by wearing a hat, and finds out that the city really isn't as amazing as they initially thought. There's a lot of supplies and other stuff that they don't have, and there's bridges and stuff that are being built, and I guess Jeff Bezos bought all the diapers meant for this town as well to sell on Amazon. Then the Asian military is basically like to his brother, yo, you gotta, snitch on, Yatagurusu or whatever, and then we'll help you get your supplies and all that. So Tezuka goes to visit Yatagurusu. He basically tells them that the Asian military is going to attack them, but is it a setup? So it was a setup, and the brother winds up like hacking into their servers and steals a bunch of information. But then Yada one ups them by giving him fake information. And then at the end of the episode, there's kind of like a face-off between Tezuka and his brother, where Tezuka basically tells him that they gave him this fake information, and he's like, it's not even worth going to tell the military. And his brother's like, no, I built up, too much. I'm gonna try to give them the information so that I can kind of keep my town. Tezuka threatens to shoot him, but he's sort of unable to, and his brother sort of gets away. So I think this was an okay episode. It had some good aspects and some bad aspects. Let's start with the good. I think that this was an interesting plot for an episode. We don't really see other approaches in mech shows that don't really involve fighting, but in this case, Tezuka's brother went about helping out the Japanese people in his own way. I think this would have created some interesting tension, except for, well, okay, on to the bad. I think it was a little too early for this episode. I mean, we barely even know Tezuka. We've only known him for a few episodes, and there really hasn't been a lot of character development, so I didn't really sympathize with him too much for sort of having this struggle. They also sort of took the easy way out in resolving the conflict, rather than Tezuka actually have to make a hard decision, with sort of two equally good options. They basically just turn his brother into a villain so that Tezuka has to take one of the options. They also didn't really take advantage of having some sort of tension with the evil businessman. There could have been maybe an interesting plot point where he's causing trouble to, just sort of like sell more weapons or keep the war ongoing or, whatever. But instead, he just sort of walks in for some plot exposition and then he just leaves, never to be heard of for the rest of this episode or mentioned again. Since they did wind up, going with just turning his brother, evil, I felt like they introduced and resolved that plot point just too quickly. Imagine if they had introduced his brother and then have the payoff of him being a spy, maybe a few episodes later, rather than just a one and done, episode he's introduced at the beginning and they're kind of done with him by the end. And that kind of got me thinking that there really isn't a lot of carryover between the episodes of this show. Yatagurusu, is progressing throughout Japan and kind of growing the group. But the show doesn't really reference anything that happened in previous episodes, with a few exceptions. One last thing was the kind of standoff at the end that I mentioned. It was a little unclear if Tezuka was bluffing about Yada making up the false info. On one hand, they say that they played him, but on the other hand, Tezuka kind of could have been making up a story just so that his brother sort of had a cover story to tell the Asian military. I wish they had expanded on that a little bit more. It could have been, again, another sort of interesting tension point. But it sort of seems like the recurring theme of the show is just a very generic plot line with a number of sort of half-baked ideas. I think that this episode was better than most, but I wouldn't say it was a good episode. And since the plot points are very rarely, revisited or mentioned again, this is probably going to amount to just being a complete filler episode, and it's only episode 9. Anyway, the next episode looks like there might be a cool battle, finally, so look forward to that. Thanks so much for watching this episode. I do anime reviews on Monday and figure reviews on Wednesday, and please join me for this Wednesday's episode where we're going to review the Metal Robot Spirits Versal Knight Gundam. Thanks so much, and keep collecting.